Hi, third graders. The last time we were together, we worked on identifying parts on a plot mountain. So remember, we started with the beginning, the middle, the end, identifying those pieces, but what specifically is included at the beginning, right? It's the introduction of your characters and your setting. And then we have the climb up the mountain, which is the rising action. That's where you're telling the story and the things that are leading up to the conflict or the problem in the story. And remember, when we get to the top, we call that the climax, the top of the mountain. That's where we're going to have our turning point in our story. And that's where it kind of gets the most intense and the character starts to change. We tell the rest of the story, and finally we have our ending, our resolution. What did the character learn? And some of my friends are getting really confused about lessons that they've learned. So they might choose a time when they learn to ride a bike, and they think the lesson is that they learned to ride a bike. No, the lesson is, what did you learn about yourself when you were learning to ride the bike, right? That's why I asked you to watch that video on theme, because that can help you identify the lesson that you learned in a situation. So be thinking about, what did you learn about yourself on the inside? Did you learn to be brave? Did you learn to take risks? Did you learn to never give up? Did you learn to, to keep your eyes on the road if you're riding a bike, right? It depends on your story, but maybe you can ask your parents to help you identify, when's the time I learned a lesson in something that I can write about, right? This is about your life. So I can't tell you what to write about. I can just show you ideas. That's what I did the other day. Your job is to follow along during the videos and to write things down like I ask. So we started about the other day looking at the story mountain, right? We did one on the story Fireflies. And then I showed you my story mountain that I was going to write about the time I learned to paddleboard. And we talked all about my characters, my rising action, right? That turning point, how I changed, what I felt about myself. And then I finished my story, right? And then here's kind of my lesson at the end. You'll notice I added my emotions in here as well. How was I feeling during all of this? I also said, this is not my entire story. These are just kind of the big points. I'm going to give details when I write. But I want to show you today what we would do in the regular classroom if we were doing writing in person. In my room, we did rotations. So my students wrote quietly, nobody talked, and they moved from one station to the next as they finished. So today we're going to start and talk about the planning station and how we plan. We need to know this information in order to create our plan, right? Our introduction, our rising action, our falling action. Those are terms that you need to know as a third grader. You're going to get your own copy of this power organizer. Okay, we will use a power organizer that looks just like this for every type of writing we do in third grade. There's always a triangle at the top, a triangle at the bottom, and there are 3 rectangles in the middle. Now, the information that you put inside there will be different every time you write something different. If it's a personal narrative, if it's an opinion, if you're writing about informational things, expository, explaining how to do something, it won't matter. We'll use this exact same power organizer. It's just the information will be different because you're going to be writing about a different kind of writing. Okay, so let's look at this because you're all going to have a copy of this. For a personal narrative, this introduction part, right? We're going to have a lead. You want to hook your reader, and we'll talk about that in the next couple of days. But up here, we're going to put our characters and our setting so we can kind of set the story, right? We want to tell our reader about where we are and who we're with and what it's like. And then in this first rectangle, you'll notice here's my rising action. Okay. First, there's a good transition word. And then I'm going to list some events that happen in that rising action part of my mountain. And I also want to write down my emotion. That's why I have a heart there. How am I feeling during that part of the story? Our next rectangle, here's another transition word, looks just the same, except this is the part where we have our turning point, kind of what happens there. And then finally, we have our third rectangle, and this is that falling action part. Okay, so the rising, the turning, and the falling. That's why it's so important for you to know the parts of a story plot mountain so that you can take your specific pieces of your story and you know where to put it on your power organizer. Okay, and then finally, at the end, last, there's another good transition word. Could have used finally, could say in the end, right? What's the lesson? What's the last thing that happened and the lesson that I learned as a participant in this story? Because you are the character, right? So thinking about introducing the characters, the three parts of your mountain, and then your resolution is at the end, okay? So you're going to get your own copy of that. This is a copy of my power organizer. Okay, I just want to show you how I filled mine out so that you can do the same using your plot mountain today as well. So I didn't put anything for my lead because we haven't talked about leads. We don't know how to hook our reader yet. We're going to talk about that later, I said in a few days. But I filled in the characters and the setting and everything that I had, right, from my plot mountain right there. I just transfer that information up here. I might change it a little bit. I might say it a little bit differently. That's okay. And then I started to talk about some big points in my rising action. Now, a lot of things happen before I get to that turning point. So I just jotted down a couple of things, right? Remember, this is just my plan. My power organizer is my organized plan for my writing. When I start to write my story, I'll add a lot more detail. So first, I said we ate breakfast, we drove to the paddleboard shop, right? That tour guide took us to Echo Lake for our lesson, right? So this is kind of the rising part of my story. We ended up having that lesson on land so that we could learn the skills that we needed to take into the water, right? And then I put that heart there. How was I feeling? I was nervous. I was fearful. Remember, I told you I almost wanted to quit. Next, it's a good transition word, right? After our lesson, we headed to the water to practice on our knees first. This is where my turning point happens, right? I had to decide, am I going to do this or not? And I stuck with it. I didn't give up. We got in the water and practiced. We did it on our knees. And then we had to stand up and try to paddleboard into the lake. I stood up and I actually could do it. I was paddling all by myself. I didn't fall. I didn't need any help. I was really scared, but I was learning and I was listening to what my instructor was saying. And I was so proud of myself. I honestly couldn't believe that I did it. Then I enjoyed paddling all around the lake, right? It was beautiful. The views were lots of things happening. I told you about that yesterday. There was kids in a sailing class on little tiny sailboats. It was so peaceful and it was just such a freeing experience and I loved it. So I'm telling you kind of the rest of my story after, right? I did the hard part. I also told you I never fell and I was so excited about that. I was really happy when I was in this part of the story. I just felt so happy and so fulfilled. So lastly, right, I ended up having the best time learning to paddleboard and I just loved it so much. So in the end, I learned not to give up. Because remember, I wanted to quit. I almost didn't get in the water. So I learned not to give up. I also learned, right, to be brave and to try something new. So maybe I learned a couple different things. Maybe you've learned a couple different things in your story as well. This is what you're going to get to do today. You're going to create your own power organizer. Remember, you're going to leave the lead blank because we haven't talked about that. Yours has some very specific information. So make sure that you're following along with your plot mountain so that you add your information into the correct spot on your power organizer. You're going to get really comfortable and handy using these power organizers because we're going to use them in third grade for every type of writing that we do. One thing I want to mention, this is an expectation, okay? You don't do this if you feel like it. Everybody needs to do this because this will come with you to your small group so that we can have conversations and we can help each other and brainstorm, and we're going to share out. So make sure you work on this and you are ready to share.